My name is Anna. The entire world seemed to shrink and then vanish, leaving only the profound, dead silence of the courtroom. It was a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders, making it hard to breathe. My former colleagues, the very individuals who had systematically and cruelly transformed my daughter's life into a landscape of fear and anxiety, were seated at the defendant's table. They just stared, their eyes fixed on the polished wood as if it held the secrets to their salvation, refusing, absolutely refusing to meet my gaze. I could see Carol Peters from across the room. Her usually vibrant, malicious face was now a pale, slack mask of disbelief. Her mouth slightly agape as if she had forgotten how to close it. And next to her, Chen, a man who always, without fail, had a smug, cutting retort for everything, was now just a sweating, deflating figure under the harsh glare of the courtroom lights. His arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a sheen of perspiration on his brow. It was as if they were both silently praying that the inert, wooden table would magically open up and swallow them whole, providing an escape from the reckoning they had so long evaded. Then the judge's voice, a deep and resonant baritone, boomed through the chamber, shattering the oppressive silence. This court orders an immediate halt. Every single word landed with the percussive force of a blacksmith's hammer on an anvil, each syllable a judgment. But what he said next? Nobody in that room could have possibly seen that coming. Not my sharp, dedicated lawyer, who had prepared me for every conceivable outcome. Not the company's phalanx of expensive, tailored suits and their army of legal strategists. And most certainly not me. I thought my journey had been a simple, private one. To give a little girl a new chance, a new beginning, a life filled with the unconditional love and happiness she so profoundly deserved. I never, not in a million years, could have imagined that the very people I had shared coffee with for nearly a decade, the people I'd wished happy holidays and asked about their weekends, would be the ones to twist that beautiful dream into an unrelenting nightmare. This is the story of how their casual, thoughtless cruelty, their daily doses of poison, led us down a path we never chose, into a sterile courtroom, and ultimately, to a judge's decision that left every single person in that room utterly and completely speechless. Before I get into the heart of it, I have to ask for your support. If stories about fighting for what's right and finding justice in unexpected places resonate with you, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications. It's a small click for you, but it truly does help us grow and share more stories like this one. It all began not with a bang, but with a quiet, overwhelming wave of pure, unadulterated joy. The desire to be a mother had been woven into the very fabric of my being for as long as I could remember. It wasn't a fleeting wish. It was a core part of who I was. The journey, as it so often is, was anything but easy. It was a marathon of hope and despair, a seemingly endless navigation through a veritable mountain of paperwork, interviews, and background checks that felt more like an interrogation. But after years of waiting, of holding my breath, of riding that roller coaster of raised and dashed hopes, the call finally came. And with that call came a name, Lily. She was 6 years old, with soulful wise eyes that seemed to hold a universe of stories, and a smile so radiant it could stop you in your tracks and make you forget all your troubles. From the very first moment I met her in that sterile, impersonal little visitation room, with its scuffed toys and a faint scent of disinfectant, I knew. A feeling of certainty, profound and unshakable, washed over me. She was my daughter. Adopting an older child is a unique and special kind of journey. You aren't just bringing home a blank slate, a baby to mold from scratch. You are welcoming a whole person into your life, a person with a history, with memories, and a life that started long before you ever entered the picture. Lily was a beautiful, unbelievably resilient black girl who, at the tender age of 6, had already faced more hardship and uncertainty than most adults I know. My singular goal, my only mission from that day forward, was to build a world of impenetrable love and absolute safety around her. I envisioned it as a fortress, a sanctuary so warm and bright that the creeping shadows of her past couldn't possibly find a way in. Those first few months were nothing short of bliss. It was a honeymoon period of discovery and connection. We learned that we were both devoted fans of strawberry ice cream but shared a mutual, fierce hatred for peas. We spent countless golden afternoons at the park, where I would push her on the swings, her infectious laughter echoing through the air as she pumped her little legs, trying to soar high enough to touch the clouds. Our weekends became a blur of creative chaos. We painted vibrant, messy masterpieces, we devoured giant stacks of library books, and we constructed the most epic pillow forts in the living room, complete with secret passages and designated snack zones. Her room, which had once been a generic, soulless guest space, slowly began to bloom with her personality. The walls became a gallery of her vibrant drawings, filled with colorful animals and fantastical castles. For the very first time, my house, which had always been just a place I lived, truly felt like a home. I watched with a heart full of gratitude as the quiet, guarded little girl I had first met slowly, cautiously, let her walls down brick by brick. She transformed into a bubbly, effervescent kid who would spontaneously grab my hand, her small fingers fitting perfectly in mine, and fill our once quiet days with a stream of happy, endless chatter. I thought, with a naivety that now seems almost painful, that this was it. This was the beginning of our happily ever after. I truly believed that my love alone would be a sufficient shield to protect her from everything the world might throw at her. I was so devastatingly wrong. The first hint of trouble, the first crack in the beautiful facade of our new life, came from the one place I never would have expected: my job. I was a senior compliance officer at Sterling Financial, a respectable mid-sized firm located in a sleek downtown skyscraper. I wasn't a new hire. I'd been there for almost 10 years. I was, for all intents and purposes, part of the office furniture. I knew everyone, had trained at least half the people on my floor, and genuinely considered many of them to be my friends. Or so I had foolishly thought. The company had this annual tradition, the Family and Friends Day. It was their yearly attempt at projecting a wholesome, family-friendly corporate image. I'd always found it a bit forced and cheesy in the past, but this year was different. This year I had a daughter to bring. I was practically bursting with pride and couldn't wait to introduce Lily to the people I spent 40 hours a week with. Lily herself was vibrating with an almost electric excitement. She spent what felt like an hour meticulously picking out her favorite yellow sundress, the one that spun out perfectly when she twirled. She then sat patiently as I helped her style her beautiful, coily hair into 2 perfect, bouncy puffs. The second we walked through the glass doors into the office, I felt it. A subtle but unmistakable shift in the atmosphere. The air, usually filled with a low hum of productivity and friendly chatter, felt suddenly charged and off. Instead of the usual warm hellos and good to see yous, we were met with a series of polite but distinctly cool nods. And then came the stares. They weren't overtly mean, not at first. Just these long, lingering, questioning looks that followed Lily as she held my hand, her small fingers gripping mine just a little tighter. I tried to brush it off as simple curiosity, forcing a smile as I led her toward my desk. That's when I saw them, standing by the coffee machine like 2 vultures waiting for their moment. Carol Peters, the office's unofficial gossip columnist, and Mark Chen, her smirking, ever-present sidekick. "Oh, Anna, you're here," Carol said, her voice a syrupy sweet confection that didn't quite reach her cold, calculating eyes. Her gaze immediately dropped from my face right to Lily. And this must be the new addition. The word addition just hung there in the air between us, sterile and transactional, making my daughter sound like I just acquired a new office plant or a high-end printer. Mark let out a low snicker, trying to muffle it with his coffee cup. I forced my smile to stay in place, pulling Lily a little closer to my side protectively. "This is my daughter, Lily. Lily, this is Ms. Peters and Mr. Chen." Lily, who is unfailingly polite, gave a tiny, shy wave. "Nice to meet you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Carol looked Lily up and down, a slow, appraising head-to-toe stare that made my skin crawl with a sudden primal anger. "She's very different from what I pictured," she said finally, sharing a loaded, meaningful look with Mark. Before I could even process the insult and formulate a reply, we were jostled aside by another colleague rushing past. As we moved to get out of the way, I felt a sharp, deliberate, and unmistakable shove in my side. It was Carol's elbow. There was no doubt in my mind. It wasn't an accident. It was a physical statement, a shove that pushed me off balance and into the hard corner of a filing cabinet. I stumbled, catching myself before I fell. I spun around, my heart pounding with a mixture of shock and rage, but they were already walking away, their heads close together, laughing about something. They didn't even look back. I looked down at Lily. Her big, bright, beautiful eyes were wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. She saw it. She felt the shift in the room, the sudden drop in temperature, just as I had. And right there, under the relentless, sterile fluorescent hum of my office, a place I had once considered a second home, I felt the first hairline crack appear in the safe, loving world I was so desperately trying to build for my little girl. After that disastrous family and friends day, Carol and Mark seemed to decide that pretense was no longer necessary. They dropped the thin veneer of civility, and the little microaggressions began to escalate, getting bolder and meaner. Their brand of cruelty was insidious and sneaky, a relentless campaign of small, deniable incidents that were clearly and strategically designed to make me feel isolated, gaslit, and like I was slowly losing my mind. Whispering was their favorite, most used weapon. Whenever I walked past their desks, especially if Lily was with me on a day I had to bring her in for a bit, the conversation would instantly drop to a conspiratorial hiss, just loud enough for us to catch biting, hurtful bits and pieces. "Did you see her hair today? It's so wild," Carol would mutter, and Mark would respond with an appreciative snort of derision. I would physically see Lily's small hands go to her carefully styled hair, her little shoulders slumping in a way that broke my heart into a million pieces. I had spent countless hours watching online tutorials, buying special products, and turning her hair care routine into a special bonding ritual for us. To them, it was just another feature to target, another thing to mock and belittle. Then there was the coffee incident. One afternoon, Lily had brought a drawing to show me during my lunch break. It was a beautiful, rainbow-colored unicorn with a shimmering horn, a creature she was immensely proud of. As we walked past Mark's desk on the way to mine, he was holding a full, steaming cup of coffee. "Whoops," he said with theatrical clumsiness as his arm jerked in a way that was completely unnatural, sending a wave of hot brown liquid all over her masterpiece. The paper buckled instantly, the vibrant rainbow colors bleeding together into a muddy, brown, ruined mess. "Clumsy me," he said with a completely fake, insincere smile, but his eyes held a cold, unmistakable glint of triumph. Lily didn't cry, not then. She just stared down at her ruined drawing, her bottom lip trembling almost uncontrollably. That silence, that stoic absorption of pain, was so much worse than any scream or tantrum could have been. She never brought another drawing to my office again. If the cruelty and casual racism you've heard about so far are making you as angry as it made me, please take a moment to hit that like button. And I'm genuinely curious. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my situation. Your engagement really helps push this story out to more people. The cruelty was a constant, low-grade hum of hostility in my professional life. They would accidentally leave printouts from racist, hateful websites discussing the supposed dangers of transracial adoption on the shared office printer, knowing I would be the one to find them. They'd brag loudly, within my earshot, about their own children's prestigious private schools or expensive extracurricular achievements whenever I was near. Carol once had the audacity to ask me, in front of several other colleagues in the break room, if I was really equipped to handle a child with such a different background, her tone dripping with false concern. Each time it was another little cut, another deliberate jab designed to make us feel like outsiders, like we didn't belong. The effect all of this had on Lily was utterly heartbreaking. The bubbly, chatty, happy-go-lucky girl I knew and loved began to recede, disappearing behind a wall of quiet anxiety. She got quieter at home, more withdrawn. The nightmares started, waking her up in a cold sweat. She'd ask me questions that just shattered my soul into tiny, jagged pieces. "Mommy, is my hair bad? Mommy, why don't your friends like me?" And the one that will haunt me forever, whispered in the dark one night after a particularly bad dream. "Mommy, was I a bad choice?" I tried with every fiber of my being to fight their poison with love. I told her every single day, multiple times a day, that she was beautiful, that she was brilliant, that she was perfect just the way she was. I told her that those people at my office were wrong, that their words were ugly and meaningless, and that their ugliness had nothing to do with her. But I could see the toll it was taking. Their cruelty was a slow-acting venom, and it was seeping into the very core of her self-worth, the one thing I had sworn to myself I would protect above all else. I was watching in helpless agony, as my daughter's brilliant, beautiful light started to dim. I couldn't let it go on. I simply couldn't. I decided to confront them directly, holding on to a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, they were oblivious fools who didn't understand the depth of the damage they were causing. I cornered them in the break room one morning before most people had arrived. "We need to talk," I said, my voice surprisingly steady even though my hands were shaking uncontrollably by my sides. "Your behavior toward my daughter is unacceptable. It is cruel, it is targeted, and it needs to stop. Now." Carol placed a hand on her chest and performed a perfect pantomime of shock. "Anna, I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about," she said, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. "We've been nothing but welcoming." "Welcoming?" I shot back, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "You whisper about her hair. You deliberately, and I know it was deliberate, spilled coffee all over her drawing. You're constantly making thinly veiled, racist comments about her background." Mark stepped forward then, his face a perfect mask of condescending pity. "Anna," he began, as if speaking to a difficult child, "I think you're being a little oversensitive. You're a new mom, you're clearly stressed. Maybe you're misinterpreting things." It was classic textbook gaslighting. They twisted everything, turning their malicious actions into my supposed emotional instability. They denied it all with the practiced ease of seasoned liars and then simply walked away, leaving me standing alone in the break room, shaking with a powerless, incandescent rage. My next and what I thought would be my final stop was human resources. I scheduled a formal meeting with Ms. Evans, the head of the department. I went into her office armed with a meticulously detailed file. Dates, times, direct quotes, a list of every single incident. Ms. Evans listened, her face a blank, non-committal mask, her fingers steepled under her chin. When I finally finished, my voice hoarse with emotion, she leaned back in her expensive leather chair. "Anna," she said, her tone careful, measured, and utterly flat, "I understand you're upset. This is a big transition for you, adopting a child." "This isn't about a transition," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. "This is targeted harassment. This is racism. And it is being directed at a 6-year-old child." She held up a hand, a placating gesture that only infuriated me more. "Let's not use such inflammatory language, shall we? I've known Carol and Mark for years. They have an old-fashioned sense of humor, perhaps, but they certainly aren't malicious. Are you sure you aren't reading too much into a few clumsy jokes and unfortunate accidents?" She had the gall to suggest that perhaps Lily was overly sensitive, or that I, as a new mother, was projecting my own insecurities onto harmless office banter. She concluded by saying she'd have a quiet word with them, but the message was crystal clear, delivered between the lines of her corporate jargon. She didn't believe me. Or even worse, she did believe me, but had decided it was far easier to manage the victim than to confront the perpetrators. In her eyes, I was the problem. I walked out of that sterile gray office with a cold, sickening sense of dread knotting itself in my stomach. The system, the very structure that was supposed to protect employees, had not only failed, but it had also sided with the bullies. I was completely and utterly on my own. The breaking point, the final straw that shattered my resolve to handle this internally, wasn't a whisper. It was loud, it was public, and it was utterly, soul-crushingly humiliating. The company was hosting its annual charity gala at a fancy downtown hotel, a night of self-congratulation disguised as philanthropy. Part of the evening's program involved the children of employees giving short, pre-approved speeches about the meaning of charity. Lily, who has a heart of gold and a boundless love for animals, had been practicing for weeks. She was going to talk about the local animal shelter where we volunteered together on weekends. When it was her turn, she walked up to the massive podium, clutching her little handwritten note cards. She looked so small behind it. She looked out at the sea of faces, found me in the crowd, and gave me a brave, trembling little smile. She took a deep breath and started to speak, her voice a little shaky but clear and sweet. Charity means helping those who can't help themselves, like all the puppies and kittens at the shelter. That's when I heard it. A distinct snicker from a table in the back of the cavernous ballroom, the table where Carol and Mark were sitting with a few of their cronies. Lily faltered, her eyes darting towards the sound, her focus broken. Then came Carol's stage whisper, deliberately loud enough for at least half the room to hear. I wonder what shelter she came from. Their table erupted in muffled, ugly, hateful laughter. You could physically feel the poison of that comment wash over the entire room. I saw Lily's face just crumble. All the light, all the bravery just drained away. Her note cards slipped from her trembling hands and scattered across the stage floor like fallen leaves. She just stood there, frozen, a tiny solitary figure under the spotlight, as the sound of laughter from that one table echoed in the horrified silence that followed. This part of the story is so important, and it's a pain I know others have felt. If you know someone who has ever been made to feel small or has been silenced by bullies, please consider sharing this video with them. It might just be the message they need to hear to know they're not alone. Something inside me just snapped. It wasn't a conscious thought. It was a primal, instinctual reaction. I didn't think, I just moved. I walked straight through the maze of tables, my vision tunneled, my entire focus narrowed to Carol's smug, laughing face. The laugh died on her lips when she saw the look in my eyes. I didn't scream or yell. I leaned down, my face close to hers, and my voice was a low, shaking, venomous whisper. You are a monster, I said, each word dripping with a cold fury I didn't know I possessed. And I am going to make you regret this for the rest of your miserable life. I turned on my heel, walked back to the stage, and scooped my daughter into my arms. She buried her face in my shoulder and finally let out the wrenching sobs she'd been holding in for months. I carried her out of that opulent ballroom, past the stunned, gaping faces of my colleagues, and out into the cold night air. Holding my weeping, shattered child in my arms, I knew with absolute certainty that this was over. No more quiet meetings, no more HR reports, no more trying to appeal to a non-existent sense of decency. We were going to fight, and we were going to win. That night, I didn't just walk out of a corporate party. I walked out on my career and straight toward a war. The next morning, I didn't call in sick. I didn't quit. Called a lawyer. I found her through a women's advocacy group I'd donated to in the past. A sharp, formidable, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies. I sat in her sleek, minimalist office, the city skyline behind her, and the whole sordid story just came pouring out of me in a torrent of pain and anger. I told her everything, from the first stare on family day to the last, hateful laugh at the gala. When I was finally done, exhausted and empty, I expected her to be professionally sympathetic. I didn't expect her to be personally furious on my behalf. Anna, she said, her voice quiet but vibrating with a controlled, righteous anger. What you're describing isn't just unprofessional or mean-spirited. This is a textbook hostile work environment, made exponentially worse by the clear and present racial discrimination targeting a child. What they did to your daughter. It's monstrous. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something other than despair. It was hope. Ms. Davies laid out the plan with chilling precision. We wouldn't just sue Carol and Mark as individuals. We would sue Sterling Financial for creating, fostering, and allowing this toxic environment to flourish, and then actively participating in a cover-up. Filing the lawsuit was like firing a cannon into the placid waters of their corporate denial. The company's attitude changed overnight. The feigned concern was gone, replaced by open hostility. They suspended me, citing the need for an internal investigation. A clear and transparent tactic to isolate me and shut me up. Then came the severance offer. A pathetic, insulting amount of money that wouldn't even cover my mortgage for a year, contingent on my signing an ironclad NDA. They just wanted me to take their hush money and disappear. It was terrifying. Suddenly, I had no income, a mortgage payment looming, and a daughter who depended on me for everything. There were long nights where I lay awake, heart pounding in my chest, the cold grip of fear tightening around me, wondering if I'd made a catastrophic mistake. What if we lost? What if I bankrupted us for nothing? But then I'd tiptoe into Lily's room and look at her sleeping face. I'd see the shadow that still lingered in her eyes even in sleep, and I'd remember how she'd stopped drawing her magical unicorns. In those moments, my fear would just burn away, transmuting into a cold, hard, diamond-sharp resolve. They tried to break my daughter's beautiful spirit. They had severely underestimated the power of a mother's love. I instructed Ms. Davies to reject their offer in the strongest possible terms. We were going to court. The pre-trial process was a grueling war of attrition. Their lawyers were sharks, circling constantly, trying to twist my words, to paint me as a greedy, unstable, hysterical new mother looking for an easy payday. But Ms. Davies was my shield and my sword. She fought them at every turn, deflecting their attacks, protecting my and Lily's privacy with fierce determination, all while meticulously building our case, piece by piece. We were ready for the fight of our lives. The first day of the trial was completely surreal. Walking into that courtroom felt like stepping onto a stage for a play I never wanted to be in. When I was called to the stand, my heart felt like it was going to beat its way right out of my chest. But as I sat down in the witness box and the court clerk administered the oath, I looked out and found Ms. Davies, who gave me a small, encouraging nod. I pictured Lily's face, her smile, her trusting eyes. I took a deep breath and started talking. I told them everything. I described the whispers about Lily's hair, my voice cracking with the memory of her slumped shoulders. I told them about the look on her face when the hot coffee ruined her precious unicorn drawing. I told the court about the gut-wrenching questions she asked me in the dark, the nightmares, the slow, painful dimming of her vibrant spirit. They weren't just attacking me, I said, my voice shaking but clear, looking directly at the jury. They were trying to extinguish the light in a 6-year-old child. And my company, my employer of 10 years, did absolutely nothing to stop them. The cross-examination was as brutal as Ms. Davies had warned. The lead defense attorney, a slick man with a condescending smile, came at me hard. "Mrs. Miller," he began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "You were a new mother, dealing with the stress of a new adoption. Isn't it possible you were under a great deal of stress?" "My stress wasn't the problem," I said calmly, looking him directly in the eye. "The harassment was." "Harassment is a strong word, wouldn't you say? Isn't it more possible that you perceived private conversations as whispers? That the coffee incident, however unfortunate, was just an accident? Is it possible," I countered, my voice gaining strength, "to have dozens of accidents and misunderstandings, all directed at the same 6-year-old black child? Is that the kind of coincidence Sterling Financial is comfortable with?" He tried every trick in the book to paint me as unstable, greedy, and delusional. But every single time, I brought it back to the simple, undeniable truth. Their actions and the company's inaction had caused real, documented harm to my child. I wasn't speaking as a plaintiff. I was a mother defending her daughter, and I made sure the jury knew it. Watching Carol and Mark take the stand was a bizarre combination of satisfying and utterly pathetic. They had clearly been coached within an inch of their lives, walking up to the witness box with practiced, sincere expressions plastered on their faces. Carol went first, painting herself as the bewildered victim of my unhinged and baseless accusations. Then it was Ms. Davies's turn. "Miss Peters," she began, her tone deceptively gentle, "when you elbowed my client on Family Day, was that a welcoming gesture?" Carol's eyes widened in mock surprise. I don't recall that specific moment. If it happened, it must have been an accident in the crowd. And when you whispered loud enough for a 6-year-old child to hear that her natural hair was wild, was that also an accident of speech?" "I never said that," Carol snapped, her composure finally cracking. Ms. Davies then calmly produced a sworn, signed affidavit from another colleague who had been standing right there and had heard it all. The color drained from Carol's face. Mark's testimony was an even bigger disaster for them. He tried to play it cool, a smug, charming rogue who dismissed everything as a joke or locker room talk. Ms. Davies let him dig his own grave for a while before she zeroed in on the charity gala. "Mr. Chen, do you find jokes about the origins of adopted children to be particularly funny?" It was a tense situation. "You know, people sometimes laugh nervously," he blustered. "Really?" Ms. Davies asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because we have the hotel's security video from that evening. It doesn't have audio, unfortunately, but the image is crystal clear. It shows you leaning in to hear what Ms. Peters says, then throwing your head back and laughing heartily. It doesn't look like nervous laughter, Mr. Chen. It looks like you're having a wonderful time." She played the clip on the large courtroom monitors. The entire room was silent, watching the silent, damning movie of their cruelty. Mark's face turned a blotchy, mottled red. His entire smug act dissolved into pure, naked panic. The truth, stripped of all their lies and excuses, was ugly, undeniable, and on display for everyone to see. For the very first time, everyone in that room could see them for the pathetic, cowardly bullies they truly were. The jury filed out to deliberate. We waited in a tense, suspended state for what felt like an eternity but was probably only a few hours. Finally they returned. The foreman, a man with a grim, determined look on his face, stood and cleared his throat. "On the charge of creating and maintaining a hostile work environment," he said, his voice firm, "we find for the plaintiff, Anna Miller." A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. I burst into silent tears. But the judge, a stern, silver-haired man named Judge Thompson, whom I hadn't been able to read at all, held up a hand for silence. "The jury has spoken," he said, his voice rumbling through the quiet room. He took off his glasses and polished them slowly, his gaze fixed directly on Carol, Mark, and Ms. Evans from HR, who had been forced to attend. "For 3 days, I have listened to testimony that has frankly shocked and appalled this court. This isn't just a failure of corporate policy. This is a fundamental failure of basic human decency." He stared right at Carol and Mark, his eyes like chips of ice. "You two took it upon yourselves to torment a child, 6-year-old girl. You did this for your own sick amusement. Your actions were cowardly, pathetic, and utterly despicable." Then he turned his powerful gaze to the company's lawyers. "And you, Sterling Financial, you were informed of this poison in your workplace. You were given every opportunity to fix it. And you chose, consciously, to protect the perpetrators over the well-being of a little girl. You are not just negligent, you are complicit." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. A simple monetary judgment is not sufficient here. It doesn't repair the damage done to a child's spirit. It doesn't address the systemic rot that allowed this to happen in the first place. He glanced down at the jury's decision. The jury has awarded compensatory damages, and to that, this court is adding a punitive award of $5 million. A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom. The company's lead lawyer shot to his feet, sputtering, "Your Honor, that is an outrageous." Judge Thompson silenced him with a single withering glare. "So is the behavior I have witnessed in this court. I am not finished." He looked directly at me, and for the first time, his stern expression softened with something that looked like empathy. "And I will say this to Sterling Financial. You have a choice. You can simply write a check, or you can use this as a painful but necessary opportunity to fund a real, meaningful antidote to the poison you allowed to fester in your own halls. You will take the poison you created," he said, his gaze shifting back to the defense table, "and I expect you to pay to create the cure. And the woman you tried to silence and dismiss will be the one holding it. That is the order of this court." The silence that followed the judge's words was absolute, profound, and ringing. Carol looked like she was going to be physically sick. Mark just stared blankly ahead, a completely broken man. Ms. Davies squeezed my hand under the table. "He just did it," she whispered, a triumphant, brilliant smile spreading across her face. "He funded your new life's work." The aftermath was swift and decisive. Carol and Mark were fired the very next day, the company citing the reputational damage they had caused. Their careers, as they knew them, were over. Ms. Evans, the head of HR who saw nothing wrong, was allowed to resign to avoid the humiliation of being fired. Faced with a massive verdict and a PR nightmare of epic proportions, Sterling Financial had no choice but to negotiate in good faith. They didn't want any more of this fight. In the final settlement, they agreed to the judge's terms, funding the foundation he had spoken of. The day the first check for $5 million arrived, it felt like a dream. We named it the Lily Foundation. The very first thing I did as the foundation's director was take my own daughter on a long, sun-drenched vacation to the ocean. I sat on the sand for hours and just watched her play in the waves, her laughter finally free and unburdened again. The light was returning to her eyes. When we got home, her drawings were once again full of magical unicorns, this time flying over vast oceans and majestic mountains. Running the Lily Foundation became my life's work. We provide grants to families struggling with the high costs of adoption. We create mentorship programs that connect transracial adoptees with successful adults who look like them, who've walked a similar path. We develop and fund workshops to properly train people in companies and schools on the complex realities and unique challenges of transracial families. Every family we helped, every child we supported, was a direct victory over what they tried to do to us. We took the ugliest, most painful experience of our lives and transformed it into something beautiful, something that helped others. My name is Anna, and I am the proud mother of the strongest, most resilient person I know. Her name is Lily. The world tried to tell her she didn't belong, and a few cruel, small-minded people tried their very best to break her spirit. But they failed. The scars from what we went through are still there, I suppose, under the surface. But now they're just a reminder of a battle we fought and a war we won. Today, Lily is a thriving, brilliant, compassionate teenager who is more confident and empathetic than I ever could have dreamed. She volunteers for the foundation, serving as a fierce and articulate advocate for kids just like her. Sometimes, she'll catch me looking at her with tears welling up in my eyes and she'll just smile that radiant smile of hers. "You're thinking about it, aren't you, Mom?" And I am. I'm thinking about the pain, yes, but mostly, I'm thinking about how the fight for one little girl's dignity and spirit ended up building a fortress of hope and support for thousands more. They tried to make my daughter feel small and invisible. But because we fought back, her name is now a beacon of hope. And that is a victory that no bully, no matter how cruel, can ever take away from us. Thank you so much for listening to our entire story. It means the world to us. If our journey has moved you, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking this video, leaving a comment with your thoughts, and sharing it with someone who might need to hear a story of hope and justice. Your support helps us continue to fight the good fight.